Welcome to Burnout Solutions, a podcast designed to help high achievers and healthcare professionals understand stress and how it can lead to burnout. Together, we'll explore how your brain and nervous system naturally work and why they sometimes hold you back, and how to overcome those challenges to fully enjoy the success you've worked so hard to create. I am your host, Mona Tippett, registered nurse, burnout coach, and resiliency educator. Welcome back to Burnout Solutions. Today, we are talking about emotional processing. This is our third podcast in our series of tools to help reduce stress and burnout. And I am here with Micah Murdoch, who is another life coach. If you haven't listened to the last two episodes, I encourage you to do that, but you don't have to. I'm going to have him introduce himself just so that you can get to know him. Go
Great.
ahead,
Thanks,
Micah.
Mona. It's good to be with you today. I enjoy these podcast sessions very much, and I'm excited about our opportunity to talk about emotions. I think this is a big topic that a lot of us need help with. We all feel a lot of big emotions, and sometimes we don't know what to do with it. So today we're going to give you some useful tools to help respond to that. I've been coaching for about 3.5 years now, and I work with clients in a similar vein of burnout, educators mostly, and high-performing business folks, and even parents. So it's good to be here with you, and I hope that we can have a great discussion.
Yeah, awesome. Excited that you're here again. Today, we're talking about a specific way to process emotions. And this skill we learned in life coach school. And it is actually called the Emotional Reboot. And this was just a method designed to help you navigate intense feelings. And it also helps develop emotional resilience. And Mike and I were talking a little bit about this, but I was never taught how to manage emotions growing up, especially intense ones. And this was not a skill I was taught as a child. And I feel like maybe I was living under a rock. I don't know. This is definitely a huge emphasis in life coach school, right, Micah, that we
Yeah.
talked about emotional
Yeah, big
processing.
deal. I'm same as you. Not any fault of our parents or anything like that. It just wasn't done, right? People just didn't do that back then. It was go outside, go
Yeah.
downstairs, go run around the block if you're being too much of a handful. Lots of other strategies, and they probably got that from their parents too. So again, no fault of anyone,
Uh-huh.
but it's great that we have more research, more understanding, and more tools in our belt to use these and to be able to do something different than just go punch each other in the face or go run around the block. Not that those are always not the right choice. Sometimes a little physical exertion is exactly the right solution, but at the same time, that's not always an option, particularly among adults. And I think that for parents and other professionals that we're working with, medical professionals, teachers, getting physical is like the opposite of what we want. And so having tools inside that we can maintain this
Yeah.
is always going to be really helpful.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think a lot of us process or try and buffer. In life coach school, we called it buffering emotions. And this is when we are either distracting ourselves through scrolling, through social media, through watching shows. I find myself resisting them. Like, I don't want to be upset right now. I don't want to fly off the handle. My face is showing that I'm mad, but this is not the time that I can express that. And so I resist and I push it down. There's also a lot of reacting. This is actually at home as a parent. My most common way of handling big emotions is just react immediately.
Right.
And I have come a long way.
Well, you're
I have come
not
a long
alone
way.
in that. Not alone for sure.
And often this would keep me up at night is spiraling, is when my mind would just go in a huge tornado and spiral about, my child not passing their math test and how they were not going to graduate from high school and not go to college and end up homeless and end up living, if not homeless, end up living in our basement. And it
Yeah.
would keep me up at night. And and thank goodness, because of these skills and learning about processing emotions and the brain and nervous system, I now sleep well. And a lot of that is from emotional processing. So We today are going to talk about how to face your emotions head on, how to understand them, how to not be scared of them, how to actually give them the light that they need, and to accept them and be okay with them and just process them, and the exact way on how to do it. I love Viktor Frankl, and I want to share a quote. We've shared a few of his quotes before, but he has said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedom, and that is to choose one's attitude. And I
Yeah, I
love
love that.
that. And I say that to my kids. We have a sign: attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference. Or like life is 10% of what happens to you, 90% of how you respond to it, all of those things. And logically, that makes
For sure.
sense, right? But we're going to actually break it down and say, how can you have a better attitude? How can you choose a different emotion than the one you're feeling now? How can you widen that space to, wow, this makes me super, super mad. But instead of freaking out and yelling at my kids or yelling at the driver who just cut me off, like, what can I do instead if I want to? And how do you know if you just are guided by that emotion or
And I
not?
heard that a lot as a kid as well. Some gratitude makes all the difference. We've heard those. I've heard all those quotes my whole life, but to me that always translated into resisting emotions, right? If I was going to have a good attitude, but I wasn't
Yes.
feeling like I had a good attitude, my response to that should be that I bury it, that I resist, that I distract myself from it. Do all the things that we just were saying are not good responses. And that wasn't because that's what I was told to do. That's because nobody knew what to do, right? There wasn't a lot of good understanding about how to
Yeah.
respond. So this idea of my attitude matters was drilled into me, and to me that just meant plaster a smile on your face and just grin and bear it, and that was the answer to every bad situation. But I think that resulted in a lot of pent up emotions that never saw the light of day, and that
Yes.
never really is like some kind of infection, right? It like festers underneath the skin and it never got healed. And so it comes out in all kinds of unhealthy ways later in life, or maybe even in that moment. So today we're going to talk about how to not
Hmm.
have it do that and how to make it a little more healthy so that you can heal the infection instead of just like pretending nothing's there and ignoring it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that. So, first, before we get into processing them, let's just talk a little bit about what emotions even are. And I like to think of emotions as being energy in action. So, these are just sensations in your body caused by a chemical reaction in your brain. Something happens. Remember, your nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of danger and safety 12 times per second. And so all of this input is going in through your five senses, and your brain is constantly analyzing, like, is this okay? Is this not okay? If it has a match to something that happens in the past that said, oh, this is scary, this is wrong, it tells your body to pump out adrenaline, pump out serotonin. There's all these hormones. We're not going to get into all the details, but those chemicals affect your body. And a lot of times we can physically feel these emotions, like a racing heart, like tight shoulders. You get sweaty palms, sweaty armpits, a tight face, a furrowed brow. And those chemicals are really just the energy, the input of what you're getting in now. And I also know all mammals have basic emotions, right? But humans, because of our prefrontal cortex and because of our more developed brain, we also have social emotions that animals don't have. And those are like shame, guilt, pride, just things like that, that are more
Yeah.
relational, right? Either us with other people or us in the hierarchy of our tribe. Do you have
Yeah,
anything
just
on
this
that?
idea that you talk about how we feel emotions, right? There's sensations in our body. Thing that I've noticed though is that there's another layer to that, and that is that the sensations that we feel are not nearly as nuanced as the emotional label could be, right? There's probably hundreds of different labels we could put on the ways that we, label our emotions, but there's probably only a dozen or so different
Hmm.
sensations that we experience as a part of that. So the other element to this is the meaning that we give, right? The context clues that we have. So I think that's another important element to this to understand is that we could feel, and this is an example I've heard used often, the difference between excitement and nervous in our body is often identical, right? It's the exact same sensations when we're excited
Yes.
versus when we're nervous. The difference is that we're adding context clues on top of that to see what the environment is around us. If we have those sensations when we're standing in front of 200 people and have to speak, that would be interpreted as being really nervous versus if we're having that same sensation and it's our wedding day, maybe we are completely excited, right? And people sometimes will say, "Oh, I'm both nervous and
Right.
excited," but it's the same sensation, and it's the meaning that we're adding to that. So there's other nuances to this that are really important that we're
Good.
going to talk about through this reboot that will help with that. But it's important to understand that just because you have the sensation, which maybe we have some control over. The thing that we really have control over is the meaning that we're giving to those sensations. And that is where we could go back to Viktor Frankl's quote of choosing one's attitude. We do have some measure of choice to decide
Mhm.
what the meaning is that we're going to
Yeah.
assign to these sensations, these emotions that we feel. And that could be the difference between whether we feel like this is, a positive thing in our life or a negative thing in our life and where we go from there. It's just a thought there.
Yeah, I love that. I have said this before in my Facebook posts. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on the podcast, but I got into mountain biking around COVID, like the rest of this whole state of Idaho
Mhm.
did. And my son, my oldest son, was into mountain biking before, and he is an adrenaline junkie. And he loves the jumps. He loves all the crazy things. I call them crazy things. He calls them thrilling things. So I love to use the example of he and I are both mountain biking. Now, I actually prefer mountain biking on the uphill because I'm in control. It gets my heart rate up. It's really good exercise in my legs, and he doesn't like that part. He loves the thrill of the down. When I feel the thrill of the down and that adrenaline, we are both having the same sensations in our body, like fast heartbeat, danger, I would say, like is in both of our minds, but I am freaked out and he
Yeah.
is loving it. And I have over the last 4, 5 years, I have learned to retrain my brain into thinking that adrenaline doesn't mean danger, I'm going to die, because I actually have never had a crash. But that's what my brain is telling me. Like that speed, that adrenaline is a warning sign to me. Whereas for my son, that's like, oh, this is so fun. Like, go faster, do
Right.
it harder.
Yeah.
Like,
I can re
and I have
I
learned
can
to
relate to your
retrain.
son. That's the side of the mountain biking that I prefer as well as this definitely the downhill over the uphill.
Okay.
So adrenaline junkie is
And I have learned to
good.
like it more. And I've actually had to teach myself, okay, this is where we smile. This is the fun part. Like even say we like this is where lots of people, like most people actually, I believe,
Yeah,
prefer down. And so I've had to retrain my body into the label that it gives that emotion at that time. Like this is exciting, it's fun, there's no danger. And so, and we are going to talk about that. Like when we can change the label, when we can change what that feeling means in our body, it can help us process it, allow it, be more comfortable with it. And anyway,
that's great.
we're going to get into
Yeah,
that.
so
Sorry.
let's talk a little. This is just a quick activity you can do if you're not driving or if you're not running, if you're in a position where you can maybe pull out a piece of paper or something, or you can just do this in your mind if you're not in a position to do that. But just imagine drawing a circle or actually draw a circle. And then inside the circle, write down all the emotions that you feel like you're allowed to feel, right? What's the quote, good
Mhm.
emotions? What are the things that you think are okay for you to feel? This might be things that you just like to feel, or things that people have told you that you should feel, or that you should be striving to feel. And then on the outside of that, write down all the emotions that you feel like you're not allowed to feel or think are wrong or dangerous or are bad. All of these, you shouldn't feel that way ideas. And after you've written all those down on inside and outside, take stock of how many are in and how many are out. And I would imagine it's possible that a lot of us have more out than we do in. And this is an interesting concept because we've come to, as a society, I think, we've come to this agreement that some emotions are ones we should feel or can feel and we're allowed to feel, and others are ones that we aren't allowed to feel.
Mhm.
But at the same time,
Yeah.
we are all human and we all have the same emotional range. Not every single person has the same range of emotions, but the same type of emotions: sad, happy, embarrassed, proud, angry.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what culture, where you're at on the earth. Like, this is not race specific or culturally specific. Like, human beings as a whole, or
Or
gender
gender
specific, thank you.
specific.
We all feel all the emotions, and that's okay. It's okay. In fact, it's normal. It's expected, and so there's nothing that's unallowed or disallowed, or nothing that we shouldn't be feeling, because they're there for a reason, and they are all contributing to our experience as a human. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that is normal, but not all of them have the same impact on our life, and not all of them are appropriate in any given situation, and we get to decide which ones are and are not. But regardless of whether they are or are not, they come. And so, how do we respond in a way that's healthy, that processes it, and allows us to feel like we're experiencing life in a way that's aligned with who we want to be and how we want to show up, versus something that feels like we're out of control and we're just doing things that are harmful and not aligned with who we want to be. So, those are some objectives of this whole processing emotion bit.
I'm glad you shared that. I also, when I think about emotions and emotions that I don't love, they are usually on the extremes of the scale. But because of those emotions, that's how I appreciate the opposite,
Mhm.
because of deep pain and anguish and maybe desperation or betrayal or, those emotions that I didn't love feeling, that helps me appreciate the joy and the thrill and the ecstasy and we need that emotional range to help us appreciate all emotions. And I believe all emotions have a place. And we weren't taught this growing up. And just like you said, no one is at fault. And sometimes I think we can swing to the opposite side of the pendulum, and those emotions lead our behavior when the behavior isn't really what we want to do. But all emotions have a place. And we're going to talk about how, let's just
Sure.
move into that, how we can process our emotion, whether we want it or not, and what we can do with that information.
And to add one other thought to
Go
that,
ahead.
rather than trying to necessarily classify emotions as like good or bad, it might be more helpful to
Mhm.
classify them as comfortable or uncomfortable. An uncomfortable emotion,
Yes. Yeah.
we might think it's a bad emotion. It's not a bad emotion. It's just discomfort. It's just, oh, I don't like this. I don't like, nobody likes to feel betrayed. Nobody likes to feel hurt or shame or these kind. And we're not suggesting that you should revel in this and, oh, this is good because it's healthy and all humans do. That isn't what we're trying to get at. It's this idea that um, there are appropriate ways to respond to uncomfortable emotions that are healthy. And because it's healthy, it helps us to respond in a way that is more appropriate to what we want to do, versus something that is destructive or hurting others or leads to behavior that then
Yes.
magnifies or emphasizes those destructive nature of some of those uncomfortable emotions.
Yes. I love that. Okay, so we'll just go into it. So this tool of the emotional reboot is what we're going to walk through. Now, the emotional reboot doesn't have to take long. We say it's 2 minutes at the most. And it's what the emotional reboot is, just a 4-step process for emotions. And this can be emotions that you're feeling in the moment or emotions that you have felt in the past or keep reoccurring. And what it does is it just helps you control the duration of the emotional pain, or because usually it's those uncomfortable emotions that we're more often wanting to do this because we always want to feel good,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's what our brain and bodies want to do, is feel good. So you could do this with a really thrilling emotion, but most people are totally fine in that state. So this is to just help you with like emotional pain, emotions that you're uncomfortable with, that are really intense, and just first off, we want to let you know that physiologically, your emotions can only last for 90 to 120 seconds, right? 2 minutes is the most. And then those emotions, those chemicals actually can dissipate in your body. And if it's going longer than that, it's just being perpetuated with your thoughts. So we'll go into that a little bit more. But the first step is to just name the emotion. So name it to tame it is what I like to say. And this is where we get specific as possible with the emotion that we're feeling. So instead of saying, I am sad, you label the emotion to say, this is sadness. I have kind of a big pet peeve with anxiety and depression. I have depression. I have anxiety. Well, you may be feeling anxious and having a lot of anxious thoughts. You may have a lot of depressing thoughts, but we don't have people walking around saying, I suffer from frustration. I mean, if that were a thing, I would have fit into that for many years. I suffer from overwhelm. I suffer, we don't have like a medical diagnosis that gives those emotions like I don't know. I feel like anxiety and depression are like the king of queen of emotions and have gotten so much attention that they're a diagnosis. I suffer from happiness or I mean, there are those optimists, but really what it is you just have that emotion in your body. And then just by naming it, they have proven that it can decrease that negative emotion by 50% because you are seeing that emotion, you're bringing it to the light, and you're acknowledging your amygdala, which is like the fire alarm in our brain that is alarming, and you're giving it, okay, fire alarm, you're alarming, but is this a whole house fire or is it just that I burned toast? And so when we can name the emotion, call it out, our amygdala feels seen and heard. And, so if you're feeling angry, you just don't say, oh, I feel bad. You say, I am frustrated. I am enraged. I'm annoyed. I am overwhelmed. And so just try to be as specific as possible can help you just acknowledge what emotion you're having.
Yeah, it's really great, Mona. Thank you. I love that. And sometimes we're not very good with vocabulary and we can't think of it, especially when we're in that moment, right? So it might be helpful even to go
Right.
online. You can, in fact, we could probably add one to the show notes, download a
Yeah.
list of emotions that we have in our program. But even if you don't use ours, you can go online, you can find them online, you can download it onto your phone, you can do a quick search on your, anyway, there's lots of internet lists out there
Yeah.
of hundreds of different labels for emotions that you can use. And sometimes it's helpful just to scan through and say, okay, this is it, or this is close, or maybe pick a handful of them. But that exercise alone, as you said, Mona, helps our amygdala tame a little bit. And then the next thing we do is we welcome it. We
Yeah.
welcome this idea that we're feeling this, and this can be very counterintuitive, but it's very
Hard.
hard, right? Especially if this is very uncomfortable. Oh, welcome into my home, Mr. Stranger, that I think might kill me. Like no one would do that, and that's
Yeah.
what we feel like we're doing if we're welcoming in this really uncomfortable emotion. But the thing that we need to recognize with that is that there's nothing inherently dangerous or wrong with feeling this
Mm-hmm.
emotion, right? Instead of pushing against it, we welcome it because that resistance that we often will exercise can magnify the feeling and the impact of that and make it actually stronger, particularly when we do things like say, "Oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way, right? Oh, I know better. As coaches, Mona, you and I, like we
Yeah.
know all this, right? And so we never feel uncomfortable feelings anymore, right? We never have it.
I wish.
Of course, we still feel it, but what we do, hopefully, not every time, at least for me, is instead of being like self-condemning for feeling shame, I can say, I'm going to welcome this. And I see that I'm not going to be physically harmed and I won't be in danger, and this is normal, and this is I don't need to judge myself for feeling ashamed in this situation. I may not want it. This is not the same as saying it's good. We're not saying that you should just accept it as it is and just be like, I'm ashamed, but no big deal. Like, we're not talking about behavior. We're just talking about the emotion itself, allowing yourself to feel it and using phrases like, I've felt this before, and I'm a human, and so I have these experiences. And it's this maybe curiosity over judgment, and that helps to just give the emotion a chance to be experienced. So that's the second step, is to welcome it. First one is to name it. Second one is to welcome it into your body.
Yeah. And after we welcome it, the third step is to just describe it. And this takes practice. I use this a lot in my stress presentations. Like, where does stress feel in your body? And most people say, "Oh, I feel it in my stomach or my shoulders or something." But they know that enough, but they don't know what it feels like. So, I like to recommend to do a body scan from head to toe. And so, where is that emotion in your body? Is it in your forehead? Is it behind your eyes? Is it in your jaw? Is it in your shoulders, your chest, your abdomen, in your legs, all the way down to your toes? I have found myself, because I do body scans quite often now, and I find a lot of times that my toes are crinkled up in my shoes. I'm like, that's so fascinating. I'm literally just sitting at my desk. Like, there's nothing, nothing scary going on. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I must have something maybe stressful, that my amygdala has like a low hum going on. Another thing you can do is, like, if you could give a color to your emotion, what color would it be? What temperature would it be? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it fast? Does it have a vibration? Does it have an intensity? Does it have a, does it radiate? Is it dull? I go back to nursing school. Like, tell me about your pain. Is it dull? Is it intense? Is it sharp? Is it sticky? The more adjectives that you can use, the better your brain gets at allowing it and describing it and processing it. This is us processing those chemical sensations in your body. So you could say, when I'm sad, my body feels like it has heavy limbs and there's pressure behind my forehead. My breathing is shallow. I have a dull ache in my heart. People say I have a heavy heart. I have a pain in my chest, my butterflies in my stomach. We use those phrases often, but when we can actually feel it and give it a lot of attention while we're describing it, that is helping us process that. And you can just sit there. I mean, you can do this while you're in a meeting, when you're driving, when you're at church, when you're having a conversation with somebody who's upset. You can actually, like, focus on how your body's feeling and relax into it or breathe into it. And that's how we are actually physically and physiologically processing those emotions, is we're describing it.
Good. I love the describing it is such a helpful thing. But I don't know about you, Mona, but when I first started learning about this, I found myself having the most difficulty with this step because I just didn't have enough awareness about what was happening in my body to be able to really label it correctly.
Mhm.
Or I felt, and I've talked to others who are also like this. It's almost there's this dissociation with your physical body where you feel emotions and you just detach and
Yeah.
just, like, again, we're using all these others. We're distracting ourselves. We're resisting. We're reacting. And we're not trying to be self-aware.
We're eating. We're
That's
eating that
right. We're
chocolate.
trying to self-medicate in any way we can. And when I've challenged myself and other clients to do this, is the one that I see most people have the most difficulty with because they're like, I don't know, like I don't know how I feel. So just be aware that this might take some practice. There might be some time required
Yeah.
for you to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I'm trying to be aware, and I do notice this one thing that happens every time, and I've never noticed that my whole life before because I've never tried to pay attention to it." So be patient with yourself on this step. If you feel like
Mhm.
you're just like, I don't know, it feels bad, and what does bad feel like? I don't know. I have feel bad inside. Like it's if that's what you feel like you're doing, give yourself some time and continue to practice that in awareness. And that might help you to be more specific with the descriptions that you're giving yourself, and you'll get better at it.
Yeah. I love
Yeah,
that.
last one is to allow it. And this is probably the simplest in concept, but maybe the most difficult of all, because again, we're talking mostly about uncomfortable emotions. And so the last thing we want to do is just sit there and feel uncomfortable, right? We want it to go away, just like any pain. We don't want to sit there if we had a
Yeah.
headache. You don't just sit there and, okay, I'm just gonna allow my headache to just pound on the inside of my head. We want to address it. We want to fix it. And that's why we have all these other
Right.
things, because we don't want to allow it. But if we can allow it to just let the feelings pass, as Mona said earlier, 90 to 120 seconds is not long. And that's the typical physiological time it takes for our body to absorb the chemicals that are released from our brain in response to a stimulus of these emotions. Now, I'm sure many of you are saying, that's a bunch of BS, Micah. I feel this way all the time, like all day. Like, what the heck are you saying? This is this result of a single stimulus is 90 to 120 seconds. But what we often will
Right.
do is we will turn this into a spiral where we go from having the single stimulus from external circumstances or whatever happens that causes it, and we internalize it, and then we begin to continue to stimulate that emotion through our spiral thoughts, through our own actions, through reacting, through some of these other things. And because we're constantly telling ourselves, oh, she's right or he's right, I'm a terrible person. I didn't do that. I made a mistake, regardless of whether that's even true or not. If we dwell on it and push on it and remind ourselves of it and obsess over it and spiral with it, then it's like a button in our brain. And the initial response was just a single button that released that feeling that goes through us. And that would, if that was the only time that button was pushed, it would be gone in a minute and a half to 2 minutes. But we just go in and become all like self- self-destructive, and we start pushing the button ourselves with our thoughts and our spiraled reactions. And when we keep pushing the button, then
Mhm.
we keep perpetuating that emotion and that feeling, and then those emotions can stay with us for long periods of time, hours, days, maybe even weeks or months. So we do have some control over that, and that's where this process can really become helpful when we're aware of how to reboot our emotions. It helps us to gain control, experience it, feel it, process it, move it out, allow it, and then it goes away. And we don't have to keep dwelling on and experiencing that emotion for a certain amount of times. What do you think of that, Mona? What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, what I was thinking when you were saying that is this is why sometimes just somebody saying, "Oh, hey, tell me about how this went, 2 weeks ago." How we can be telling the story and then I'm sure you've seen like people like start to look stressed out again. And they're feeling like the butterflies in their stomach just from
Yeah,
telling the story. And often because we're humans and we have mirror neurons, we can start to feel like that anxiety and or anticipation or fear or sadness just from the story that that person is telling us. And so that proves to you that you can just by thinking thoughts, you can stimulate that emotional cycle in
absolutely.
yourself. And so if we have a story that we're retelling and retelling over and over again, sometimes it can help lose its power and our grip because we get sick of telling it or we see the more we tell it that oh maybe I'm overreacting. But sometimes it just pushes that emotional button again and again and again. And we talked about this with our stories, our fact versus
Right.
story. That is part of how we can tell the same story over and over and over again. That isn't helpful. And that emotion comes like we'll take depression or anxiety. I'm scared around other people. And so when you're around other people, your thought is, I'm scared around these people. And then you feel that anxious feeling. And then the story and the emotion just have this repeated cycle over and over with your thoughts and then you do something that you think was stupid or other people looked at you strange and that reinforces I don't do well around other people and then you have more thoughts and more emotion
Exactly.
and, and you really can get into this awful habit and cycle and nervous system pattern and brain pattern of believing something and feeling something that you don't want to, or that isn't helpful, or that isn't promoting your goals, or helping you to be the person that you want to show up as. And this is where it can get tricky because you're like, well, but I feel that way. And then I do something and that reinforces that emotion. And then I do something that proves that I am embarrassing or I do dumb things. And this is how our behaviors are from our story, our emotion, and it can just be a vicious
Yeah.
cycle on repeat over and over and over again.
I love
And
that. It's just in respect to that, this is back to this small phrase you mentioned a minute ago when we were talking about naming it. But instead of saying something like, I'm so embarrassing or I'm embarrassed, we go back to
Mm.
this idea that
Mhm.
I am feeling embarrassed or I am experiencing embarrassment, right? I'm
Yeah.
experiencing sadness. This helps to detach the emotion from our character and our identity so we can maintain at the same time, I am a
Yeah.
person of value. I am a person worth whatever. I am a good person. I have value and worth in this society. And I feel embarrassed and I feel sadness and I can
Yes.
feel this uncomfortable emotions without it having to detract from the value of who we are because humans are inherently valuable and we are also inherently emotional. So those two things are not
Yes.
mutually exclusive in their application. So I love the idea that we can go in and have all of these experiences without having one having to taint our character or to taint our impression of ourselves or others, right? We can apply these things all to the people we love, to our children, to other people around us. Sometimes our children have uncomfortable emotions and we want to jump in and immediately save the day or distract them, or we're actually the instigator of not allowing them to process their emotions
Yes.
because we don't allow them to. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable because we have these mirror neurons and we know what it feels like to feel embarrassed or to be shamed or to have this
Uh,
betrayal happen to us. And so we jump in as parents or as professionals or as people who are in the service industry, and we think it's our duty to protect others from these emotions when in fact, we're probably doing them, in some cases at least, some disservice by not allowing them to experience their own emotions and learning how to process them so that they can be more resilient as well. So sometimes just being there and holding space and standing there and be supportive is honestly the most helpful thing we can do as we are watching someone else process their emotions to give them the skill that we're learning. And then we're both better off versus trying to take those things away from them.
yes, and that is so hard,
So hard. Oh my
especially
gosh,
as
it's so
parents.
hard as a parent with our kids. We just don't want them to feel these things ever.
Yes, and it's like, "Oh, you're sad you had a rough day. Well, let's
Yeah.
go out for ice cream." Like, ice cream makes everything better. I remember when I had littles and they were throwing a tantrum, and my sister-in-law said, "Do they want a COOKIE?" And I was like, "COO, a cookie?" I was like, "A cookie?" I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Duh, cookies make everything better." She was a well-seasoned
Yes.
parent, and I was like, "Oh, is that what you do to stop
Yeah.
tantrums?" You know? And yes, when I find myself in the pantry after an argument with my darling teenagers, just eating chocolate almonds to help dissipate that energy and make me feel better because I'm getting that dopamine hit from the chocolate. And I'm, keeping those emotions down. Is it better to eat chocolate than have a freak out? I don't know.
Yeah. And
Yes, it is. I mean, it's preserving that relationship, but I'm not don't like it having chocolate as my
right.
so
And I think
go ahead,
there's
Micah.
some differences, some subtle differences here in understanding like our typical response, right? So we could say distractions, and oftentimes in our context, we make that sound like that's a negative thing. If I'm frustrated, I had a bad, maybe I got in a fight with my wife or with my kids and something's not going right, and I just strap on my shoes and say, I'm going for a run, right? Somebody might say, oh, that's a distraction. You're not processing your emotions. But that actually might be a facilitator in helping to remove me from the immediate situation so that I can go and I can process these emotions. And sometimes physical movement and other
Mhm.
distractions can be really helpful. This is where our agency and our ability to decide, like maybe we binge on chocolate almonds, maybe we go for a run, maybe we watch a show, maybe we scroll on our phone for an hour. Some quote unquote distractions have more positive impact than others. And if eating a whole quart of ice cream is our response to feeling bad while we're quote processing our emotions, maybe we're not really doing ourselves any favors with the physical end of things while we're trying to
Right.
understand the emotional. So while we are talking specifically about the emotional reboot, it's important to understand that other behaviors are contributing to our ability, our overall mental and physical health, right? So we're not going to talk about all of those today. That's a different
Yes.
topic, but just keep in mind that we're not suggesting that any distraction is bad under all circumstances. What we are talking about in this case is that emotional reboot is a response to extreme and strong emotions that can help us to allow that emotion to be felt, experienced, to pass through and move on. So just to quickly recap, we name it. This helps us to tame it. That gives us the ability to specifically label the emotions that we're feeling. We welcome it. We are open to the idea that we do feel different emotions, even the ones that are uncomfortable. It's okay, it's normal, it's human. We describe that in the sensations in our body. That helps us to get a little bit more cognitive understanding of what's going on in our lives and in our body. And then we allow it to pass through our body. We allow it to be experienced. We allow the chemical reaction just to perfectly equipped to handle it. And it comes and it goes. And we can breathe deep. We can do lots of things to help us allow that. Maybe that's the point where you go for the run or do something else that you think aligns with your healthy habits that you're trying to accomplish. But that allowing yourself to feel it can be really helpful. And that's that last step. One time I asked my sister, my older sister, I said, what do you do when you feel like you're like wallowing in self-pity? Like, how do you respond to feeling really like I'm just poor me, right? And her response to me was, I
Hmm.
normally give
Hmm.
myself about a day or two to feel that way, and then I get sick of it and I just decide I'm going to move on. And I thought that was really profound. Like, she gives herself even some time, right? It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be 90 to 120 seconds. She said she'd give herself a whole day just to feel sad, sorry for herself. But then she gets tired of it and she's, ugh, I don't like this anymore. And then she makes a conscious decision to just say, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to move on. So it doesn't always have to be just a quick second or two. Sometimes it may take longer than that for us to get out of the mental base where we're pushing that button over and over again. But you do need to recognize that eventually, when you get sick of that feeling, you do have control. You're not a victim. You don't have to sit there longer than you want to. And you do have the ability to choose to step out of it and to feel something different.
And I think, we're not saying that any emotion is wrong or that you shouldn't feel. I mean, if your spouse died or pet died, sadness is a very natural, normal emotion to have for longer than 120 seconds. And I'm glad that you brought that up, that we can allow ourselves to be in grief. I mean, some people are in grief for a long, long time, for years. And that's okay. It's when we are using our agency and we're deciding, I want to feel something different. This isn't like bright siding yourself or gaslighting or toxic positivity. We're not talking about or suggesting or promoting that. But this is just what we're wanting to do is increase our emotional resilience. This practice can train your brain with healthy coping mechanisms. What we want to get away from is from the habits of spiraling, resisting, distracting, reacting, getting away from those habits that you don't like or you don't want to fall into over and over again. And this can help you understand and use and manage your emotions effectively and really look at them, like put the light on them and say, is this helping me? And what actions am I doing when I feel those emotions, which is increasing our emotional intelligence, which some people argue that emotional intelligence is more important than intellectual intelligence, which I I actually subscribe to that because our behaviors are very driven by our
I agree.
emotions. What other benefits do we get from the emotional reboot that you can think of? Micah,
Yeah,
any of
yeah,
them?
there's the other idea here is that as we align our emotional responses with something that's consistent with who and how we want to show up, I think there's some long-term benefits to that really help us to show greater compassion towards ourselves and to other people. We can be more compassionate of our capacity
Mm-hmm.
to feel these emotions. When we feel sad because there's a death in the family, we can feel appropriately hurt by that in whatever way that we want to without adding the extra pain of judging ourselves. And we get better at that as we get
Yes.
better at processing, as we can know that the fear of emotions kind of leaves, it goes away. No longer this dark thing in the closet that we don't really understand. It's sort of this shape that we're shining a light directly on it and saying, this is the emotion I want to feel right now. And even if it's not something you're proud of or you want to spend a lot of time with, maybe you get angry. But if you feel like this anger is justified and appropriate and you can process that in a healthy way, you're less likely to behave in ways that are going to be destructive and hurtful to other people around you.
Yes.
If you're angry and you're prone to becoming, you lash out with words or even abusive in some ways, understanding that emotion is the first step to adjusting the behaviors that you experience or that you display as you feel those things. And then you can start doing that for others. You can start having the same compassion for other people and their behaviors, which gives
Mm-hmm.
you that greater resilience to be able to stand and hold space for people that are feeling their own strong emotions without taking it on, without reacting in response. and then you can become a more stable presence in the lives of both yourself and other people around you. And I think that's huge. But that also is probably the result of a lot of practice with this. That's probably not going to happen overnight. But as you practice the emotional reboot and emotional resilience, these are all benefits that help not just yourself, but all of the people that you interact with on a regular basis. And that can have a huge impact over time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because when we model different behavior, when we model processing our emotions, even I have found myself saying to my children, I'm so sorry. I am feeling really frustrated right now and I'm acting really snippy. Please forgive me. I'm going to go into my room to cool off. Things that was not modeled to me because it was not modeled to my parents' parents or people around them. And I think just naming it out loud, kind of narrating your behavior, kind of explaining to people around you, this can help model that emotional resilience. It can help model that you are taking control and power and changing your attitude in the situation. And I think it can help increase your self confidence. It can help you realize that no emotion is too hard for you to handle. And that can be empowering. You can teach your children. I've seen my children have their self confidence grow by saying, okay, that was awful, but I know I can make a different choice next time, or I can do something different. And I love seeing just the change with being aware of our emotions and the long-term impact that it's had on me to help me rewire my old thought patterns and my old behaviors. And I would say it really has, for me, changed the culture and environment of our house just by being more emotionally
I love that.
intelligent.
And what I also heard you describing is a higher level of accountability for our behavior. When you
Mm.
described your situation, I'm going to go in my room. Like you weren't saying, I'm snippy and deal with it. Sorry, I'm just feeling really frustrated right now. And that's the excuse I'm giving for why I'm being such a bear to everybody around me. That's not what we're going. Where we're going with this is I'm having these emotions. They're my emotions. I'm capable of feeling and processing my emotions, and therefore I'm accountable for my behavior. And I'm sorry, or I didn't mean to do that, or there's this ownership that comes along with it that's
Yes.
really powerful as well. And you can mirror that and teach that to others. And then when you see your children owning their behavior as a result of their emotions, then that accountability rises and like everybody benefits from that. So I love that you
Yeah.
leaned into that as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think we're
Yeah,
ready to wrap
I
up,
agree.
right? So, just in closing, the emotional reboot really can be a tool in helping you rewire your emotions, rewire your habits and behaviors, and help you face your emotions head on and understand their nuances and understand their purpose even in your life and in your body. And we do want to leave with just a reminder that you are not your emotions. And Micah has said this a few times in the podcast that humans are inherently valuable, regardless of what emotions we do and our behaviors. We are not our behaviors either. And this distinction can give you power. And we really encourage repair
Right.
after rupture in relationships. And even acknowledging, I was acting on my emotions and I'm sorry. I'm going to try not to do that. And the more we can apply these steps, the more we can build our skill of emotional resilience, which I believe is essential to increase our happiness, to decrease our stress, to decrease our burnout, to just increase our overall well being. The Harvard study of life, this started in 1938, and they have repeatedly proven that the quality of our life depends on our relationships. And emotions are very involved in our relationships, right?
Yes.
and and this is to just help us manage those emotions better, choose our attitude, choose how we're going to behave and act. Any closing thoughts
No, I
from
just
you,
appreciate
Micah?
you summarizing that. That's really great. And emotions is a big deal, and it's really easy to talk about other cognitive tools that we have and how to change the way that you think. But we cannot talk about changing our thoughts without talking about understanding our emotions, because when our emotions hijack our thinking and they are so strong and so intense, most of the time, our tools, our cognitive thinking tools, just go right out the window if we're not emotionally regulated. And
Right.
so, being able to understand how to respond appropriate to really strong, intense, uncomfortable emotions can really set the stage for us to be able to utilize some of the other tools that we have to change the way we think, which ultimately can change all of the outcomes in our life. But to do that in a vacuum without talking about emotions would be a disservice. So, using this in the moments when things are crazy and you just feel like there's too much feeling to think, this emotional reboot can help you bring that feeling back into a reasonable, regulated place. And so that then you can lean and go back to and utilize some of the other tools that we have as well that have more to do with a cognitive effort. So, anyway, just some thoughts there on the importance of understanding how to regulate our emotions, and the reboot's a really critical tool for that.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for listening. Check our show notes. We will have the steps written out, our name it to tame it worksheet. And then, yeah, let's include the emotions also. And Micah's website will be down there, and you can contact him through there. And my website's on there. So we would love to hear any feedback of you practicing the emotional reboot. And we're happy to walk you through it and talk about it. So we're here to help wherever you need it. So thanks for listening. And we will see you next time with our last episode. And this last episode just kind of compiles everything into how we can make progress in changing our behavior, changing our legacy. We talk about a paradigm shift where we use several of these tools to just live our life more intentionally. So come back for that.
Thanks, Mona.
And thanks for listening.